All right, so today we're going to look at different kinds of angles, different names for some of these different angles, and these are kind of useful, especially as you look at more geometry type stuff. So let's go ahead and get into it. There's two basic vocabulary words that we're going to talk about today. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay, the first one is, write this down, please. Vertical angles. Okay. Vertical angles. And these are angles that are directly across from one another, okay? Directly across from one another. And we're gonna look at a bunch of examples for this, okay? So I want you to draw this. Draw an X, kind of a big X here. You can use your ruler if you'd like. And then I want you to go ahead and number these angles. We'll just say this is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so vertical angles, the cool thing about vertical angles, okay, is vertical angles are what we call congruent, meaning they're the same, okay? So they are congruent. That's another vocabulary word, which means the same, okay? And we use this symbol for congruent, which is an equal sign with a squiggly on top, okay? Congruent meaning the same, because you don't say, for example, when you're talking about shapes, you don't really say that they're equal, right? You say that if they're the exact same size and exact same shape, then you need a word that says both that. Same size, same shape. So we use the word congruent, which means it's equal size, equal shape, everything's the same. So the thing about vertical angles are congruent. Okay, they're the same. So that means the angles that are directly across from each other are equal to each other. So for example, angle 1 and angle 3. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. And I'm going to prove that to you in just a second, right? We can also say that angle 2, and now notice I put those little red lines, or like if I have one mark, right? Like one single red line, that means anything that has that single red line is the same. So on this one, I'm going to put 2, 1, 2. Okay, 1, 2. So you see how I put two blue lines there? So anything that has the two blue would be the same. So angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. Can we be a little bit more consistent here? I'll put that on the outside as well. That's what vertical angles are. Now, it has to be directly across. And if you make an X with your arms, for example, you just make an X with your arms, you'll see that the top and the bottom angles, as you move your arms in and out, the top and the bottom are the same. They make when one gets bigger, the other gets bigger with it, and the same thing with the left and the right. As one gets bigger, the other one gets bigger with it. Okay, so yeah, so I'm gonna prove it to you. I'm gonna prove that these angles are the same, right? By drawing this and cross again. So it's always with this cross, okay? Now things are gonna get a little bit more confusing later because sometimes there might be an angle in between, and you're gonna be like, is that congruent? So you just kind of have to use a little bit of common sense and say, okay, which angles are the ones that are the same? Okay. So for example, okay, and you can write this down too. We'll call this example A. Let's say that this one, this angle on top was 100 degrees. Okay, it's an obtuse angle, so because it's more than 90, it's obtuse. Okay. Now, what do we remember about straight lines? Okay. How many degrees is a straight line? You guys remember? All right, or a straight angle. Okay. Right? Yeah, good. Okay. Straight line is 180, right? So if this one's 100, then that means that the next one has to be how much? Okay. If this angle right here is 100, then this angle right here has to be 80. Yeah? Does that make sense? Now check this out. This is how I'm going to prove to you that those things are equal. Now look at this line right here. Isn't that also a straight line? Right? That's a straight line also, right? So doesn't that also have to be 180 degrees? So if this right here is already 100, then how much more do I need? I also need 80 degrees. Oh, you guys see that? So I just proved that vertical angles are in fact congruent. And so what would the bottom angle be, right? What would this last angle be? I've got 80, 180. So the last angle would of course then be 100, right? Does that make sense? And then look, now all the lines are add up to 180 degrees. Right? Does that make sense? Okay, so let's do an example here for you guys. Really simple one. Let's make a different looking cross here. Okay, so let's just say that this is 20 degrees, and this is, actually, we'll just say this. If that's 20 degrees, let's see if you guys can figure this out. This will be A, B, and C. What is A equal to? Let's think about it. What would A be equal to? How many degrees? Sorry, how many degrees would A be equal to here? Let's think about it. Good, good. Some of you guys are getting it in the chat. Good. Sorry, let me close down the chat. Let's think about it, right? Remember, a straight line. We have a straight line right here. I'll put in. All right. So remember, a straight line has to be 180 degrees, right? Straight line's 180 degrees. So if this angle is 20, then A would have to be 160, right? Okay, good. Now, if angle A is 160, what's angle C? Yeah, you guys trying to get that? 160 also. And if angle B would have to be, very good, right? Angle B would have to be 20 degrees. That makes sense, right? So if I fill all these in, I could say, okay, this is 160, that's 160, and that's 20, right? So even though we only had that one piece of information, we were able to figure out everything else. Let's do one more kind of like this. Okay. Okay, so let's say that this angle is 100 degrees on the bottom, and the top angle is x plus 2. So now we got to use the skills that we learned last chapter. Can you figure out what x should be? What is x? I'll give you guys a second to play around with that, see if you can put in the chat. All right, some of you guys are getting in the chat. Good job. You got a few more seconds. All right, excellent. Yeah, we know that x plus 2, right, has to equal 100. So then that means, we can do subtract 2 on both sides, subtract 2 on both sides, and we get x is equal to 98. Very good. Now, I know you probably didn't need to do all that work, and that's fine. If you just knew, well, 98 plus 2 is 100, mixing that, yeah, that's good. That's all you need to know. But know that sometimes it might be more complicated than that, and so now we just have to use our skills we learned in Chapter 6. Okay, so that's vertical angles, and we'll go over that a little bit more in detail a little bit later. So here we go. I'll give you guys kind of like a challenge problem a little bit later. Next vocabulary word, adjacent angles. And adjacent means next to. Oops, that's not 2 words. That's 2 words. Sorry. Next to, angles that are next to and they share a wall. So you can think of it as like the room that you're in right now is adjacent to maybe your parents' room or your siblings' room or the living room or a bathroom. Like whatever's on the other side of the wall is what your room is adjacent to. Okay. Adjacent means next to. So let's do an example here. So here are my adjacent angles. Okay. I could say that angle 5 and angle 6 are adjacent. They're right next to each other. What else is angle 5 adjacent to? Angle 5 and angle, good, right? Angle 8. Good job. Okay, so go ahead and write down the other pairs. There should be just 2 other pairs. What other sets are there in this grouping? All right. So how about angle 6 and angle? Very good. Angle 7. And lastly, angle 7 and angle 8. Right? Next to. Now, are angle 7 and angle 5 next to each other? No, not angle 7, not angle 5. Right? Adjacent means they've got to be exactly um, next to each other. Okay, they have to share a wall, is what I like to call it. All right. So those are the two words, right? Adjacent and vertical angles. So now, again, adjacent are just next to, and vertical are the ones that are directly across from each other, exactly the same. Okay. So let's do a little challenge problem here. Okay, let's do a little challenge problem to see how well we kind of understand all this stuff. All right. So I'm going to draw a little diagram here. All right. So let's say here this is going to be um, all right. Go ahead and draw that out. Okay. So on your homework today, this is what you're gonna have to look at. You're gonna have to look at a diagram like this, and you're gonna have to answer some questions. You're gonna have to, some of them you're gonna have to do the degrees, but for the most part, you're gonna have to say, okay, are angles adjacent? Are they vertical? Or are they none of the above? Okay, adjacent, vertical, none of the above. So let's start with angle 9. Okay, so I want to know, is adjacent, vertical, or neither? So adjacent, vertical, or neither. That's what you're gonna just be able to look at this and say, is it adjacent, vertical, or neither? So let's start with, just look at the one. How about angle 9 and angle 14? Are angle 9 and angle 14 adjacent to each other, vertical, or none of the above? Angle 9 and angle 14. Look over your notes for right now. Are they across from each other, vertical? Are they adjacent next to each other, or are they neither? What do you guys think? All right, good. And again, don't worry about spelling too much. Just try your best, okay? These guys are adjacent. You can ADJ if you want. You can just kind of shorten it if you want. Okay, how about this one? Angle 10 and angle 13 are very good, right? These ones are vertical, VER vertical. Okay. How about this one? Angle 13 and angle 11. Yeah, this is one where it gets tricky, okay? Some people are saying, like, aren't those vertical? These ones actually are neither. The way I like to think of it is vertical angles will always make the X, okay? So, for example, angle 13 and angle 10, they make the X. You guys see that? Right? Angle 13 and angle 11, they do not. Let me show you that real quick here. So here's angle 11, and here's angle 13. That is not an X, is it? Right? So those are neither. So what about angle 10 and angle 12? Nope, those are not vertical. They have to be directly across from each other, basically opposite sides of the same X. Okay. So for it to be vertical, again, in order for it to be vertical, we can go back to these notes. It's got to look like this, right? It's got to be directly across from each other. They have to make this kind of X thing. Now, you might have different things in there to get you kind of confusing, and that's why we do this example. Okay. Um, but if I was to separate, and that's a good way to look at it, is you kind of separate it out. Okay. Angle 13 and angle 10 look like this. If I was to take it out of the picture, that's what it would look like. Whereas angle 13 and angle 11 would look like this. Do you see the difference? Right? So these ones are vertical, and these ones are neither. Now, if I know what angle 10 is, do I know what angle 13 is? Yeah, angle 13, if angle 10 is equal to 30 degrees, what's angle 13 equal to? Right? If they're vertical, if they're truly vertical, right? If this is equal to 30, then this one also has to be equal to 30 degrees. So sometimes it's hard to see, like, what are you talking about, Mr. Leon? So what I like is sometimes to separate the picture out, right? Instead of a really confusing picture, I like to simplify it to um, these smaller pictures to make things kind of like easier on us. Okay. So you're gonna have to do that a little bit on your homework tonight. It's a little bit tricky, but we'll practice it and we'll get better at it. Okay. Um, okay. So again, what's really important as we kind of wrap things up is as you're looking at these vertical angles directly across, right? Directly across, they got to make that X. Okay. And adjacent angles are the ones that are just next to, share a wall. Okay. Those are the two big vocabulary words for today. Okay. So you'll practice this on the worksheet a little bit, and hopefully it'll become a little bit more clear.